All right, everybody, welcome to Chapter 1, Individuals, Societies, and Pragmatic Environmentalism. We're going to be taking kind of a big sort of above bird's eye view of what does the sociology of environment or environmentalism means, sociological ways to examine our environment and our natural world. So we're going to do that, and I'm excited. So this is Chapter 1 here. All right. What does sociology have to do with today's environmental problems, concerns, or goals? When we talk about the natural world, we are talking about a lot of science. When we're measuring radioactivity in the ocean or looking at deforestation or talking about parts per million of whatever in our water that we're trying to get out, how do we connect that to sociology? What does it really have to do with our environmental problems, concerns, or goals? And here's a link that you can watch. This was a bit during the Standing Rock protests. Now, of course, they have the pipeline that was approved has now been rejected. And I think that's a really great example here of what sociology has to do with the environment. So take a look at it, watch the video, and then we start to understand, I think, how all of a sudden we understand that people are intertwined everywhere and in every possible way, our social world, with our natural world, whatever that might be. And in some ways, it can be really positive, and in other ways, at times, it can be really negative. Sometimes we're just looking for solutions, and it's just a state of being. So, your thoughts. How are issues regarding the environment framed most often in your opinion? So, opinion questions. Are they framed as solutions? Are challenges or issues, or are they framed as problems? Now, when we get down to these lectures and when we start to discuss in class on the days that we're going to meet virtually, I'm going to tell you what. The most important thing is why. Okay, we live in a culture that's like, slap something on a bumper sticker, I hate Trump or I hate Obama, and then beep, beep, see you later. And there's never any why, right? I support the environment or this or that or the other. This is a hoax. But again, beep, beep, see you later. But really, in this bumper sticker culture or whatever, where we kind of like to say something and then not have to explain it or engage in some type of civil debate, that's what we're going to do all semester long. So we want to know the why. Why are issues or challenges that face us with the environment framed most often as solutions or as problems? So what do we do with that information? And then that's what we look at this semester too. All right, got some SpongeBob and a unicorn and sunshine and rainbows. So even in the midst of the sunshine and rainbows, what do you think? Are there problematic ecological conditions that surround us? Now, when we meet virtually, we'll look at the answers to these things. Keep in mind, throughout the semester, we hardly ever get 100% agreement. So what do you think? Yeah. All right. So I'm not sure the exact percentages, but we will find that last question, we are almost there at 100% agreement. There might be a few people that are like, no, there's no challenges that we face or problems for ecological conditions, but we know, science knows, the opposite, that certainly we do. And since we're in such high level of agreement, my question to you would be, who's left to convince? I mean, is it these, remember down here in the bottom left, the ultimate haters on the Muppet Show? Those guys, man, they're the true haters historically, and the originals. Maybe the Daily Show up here. Is it corporations or big oil or people that are trying to hide what they're doing to the environment? Is it kids? Do we have to still convince kids? So who is left to convince and why? And what I mean by that is, if we are in almost total agreement that we have problems that we need to fix because they are directly related to our survival, then why is it that it seems like we're still always trying to convince somebody and just can't quite get out of the gate with meaningful commitment towards repairing the things in the environment that we know are broken? So here's some headliners. Dakota Access developer calls environmentalists terrorists, sues for at least $300 million. What liberals get wrong about climate change. Should you trust climate science? Maybe the eclipse is a clue. Climate change costs India $10 billion every year. President Trump disbanded a federal panel aimed at fighting climate change, disbanding all sorts of federal panels, whether that's for the CDC and handling of contagious outbreaks, whether that's the dismantling of all sorts of important environmental laws and practices in place. World's largest solar thermal plant approved for Australia. Renewable energy isn't just cutting the costs, it's saving lives. The Republicans are trying to fight climate denial even within their own party. So, look, obviously, one of the reasons that it seems like there's people left to convince is because, as human beings are, and why I think it is important to look at this, therefore, sociologically, we're all over the place. We're all over the place from it's not happening, there's no problems here in the middle of a double hurricane and forest, ultimate forest fires, or we need to do something about this right now. We can't go another day. It's politicized. It's mediaized. Obviously, we know that it's a difficult thing for us to wrap our heads around, and made even more difficult, by folks who are chiming in without science. So that's why we're going to look at science this semester and how we react to that socially. What does that mean? What do we do with that information? All right. So this is a really important question here. We will talk about this, right away because it's in the first handful of questions in the very first lecture. So do you feel like fixing, Mr. Powers, do you feel like fixing the environment is definitely possible? Maybe in my lifetime, or C, impossible. What do you think? Definitely, maybe, or impossible. So we're going to talk about this in detail too, because this is a really important jumping off place for everything that comes beyond this, okay? Now, how are we going to look at it this semester? Well, we're not only going to look at it with science, and we're going to kind of like put belief on the back burner in as far as getting a grasp on what is exactly happening with our environment, our climate, and why. But we want to get this sort of down-to-earth piece. And I like this about Michael Carolyn's book. Again, Michael Carolyn is our dean in the Social Behavioral Sciences Department. He's the author of this book. He's got an office in Clark in the B Wing. If you want to talk to the author of the book, who knows, he is an expert and has written so many books and is just a great guy besides, so connect with him. But he wants to do this just like I want to do it, and that's in a pragmatic way, right? Like dealing with things sensibly and realistically in a way that is based on practicality rather than theoretical considerations. I mean, I want us to come up with solutions, but if we're going to cool the earth, and our solution is we're going to shoot this amazing satellite out of space. It's going to have 1 million mirrors on it, man. It's going to connect with other ones, and those mirrors are going to reflect the light, and it's going to cool the earth. Now, that sounds awesome, bruh. However, it's not very pragmatic, and it's not very realistic in ways. So how do we look at all of these issues? Now, I like creative, and maybe that's a creative way, and so I think that's cool. But there are more pragmatic solutions that we know that are very accessible. So one of the reasons that we want to do this, sort of sensibly or realistically, is because we want to be able to find those things, pick those solutions, right, from the low part of the tree that we know we can do. Because there's a whole lot of things that we're going to come up with that we have no idea right now because they haven't even been invented yet. Those are important. But I want us to sort of rely on a pragmatic way this semester so that we can do the things that we can do first before inventing things we've never heard of, which could be successful as well, but take quite a bit longer. We simply don't have that time in regards to the environment. And we're going to look at things this semester in a macro way, so global perspective. Why? Because we're all interconnected. Okay, like not in a hippie sense, but in a very real sense. We breathe the air from Greeley. We drink the water that comes from there too. Those could be very compromised. What's that mean? Let's look at the big picture. And then we're going to look up close. What environmental repercussions do people have and social injustice, environmental social injustice based on somebody's race or based on a geographic location of where they live and where we happen to put like the most dangerous things, garbage, factories and plants and waste plants and things like that, industrial sites. What's that mean? So we look up close this semester, and we also look at the really big picture. All right. Do you feel like you are personally doing enough? Sorry, that's early to do my Yoda, but plant trees you must. Are you doing your part? Or enough? This is personally, right? A lot of these are opinion questions. Are you doing your part or enough for the environment? Yes or no? And then more importantly, let's talk about how are you Or how aren't you? I mean, all of us, no matter who we are, me, right? Every once in a while, I teach this class. I am very focused around the environment. I have a 4-acre farm. Biodiversity is very important to me. Sometimes I'm too lazy to wash out a peanut butter jar and recycle it. Is recycling always the best idea? Look, what is sustainability? We're going to talk about that. So, do you do enough? And if you don't, how can you do your part? Or how can you do more if you know that somebody else isn't going to do their part at all? Even better, how do we convince people that don't want to do their part, don't believe in it, don't think it's a science, and just want to ignore it? How do we get those people motivated to make sure that we have a livable planet for people that come in the future, even if they don't have kids, even if you don't have kids? And one of the problems that we are trying to wrap our head around is this rugged individualism idea that we share. You know, you got to go do it alone and then you succeed. And that's how we do it in America. You pull your bootstraps up. Look, not everybody has bootstraps. And the thought that we tackle that you go get things as an individual, that's kind of a lie, right? Even the people that are like, I'm the biggest individual, I do things for myself. You got a job because of somebody. You are connected to the people in your community. The individual thing isn't the way that we live life as human beings. We are very social people, creatures, and we rely on other people. We need other people to survive. So the idea that we sell this individualistic thing, but yet we are very much a community connected to each other, is something we need to deal with, because we act in ways that reflect, obviously, our individual wants and needs. And those needs are shaped by cultural things. Oh, I need a pair of pants or this Apple computer or this phone. They are political. I've got to take this type of a view. They're technological. So even though we're independent individuals, we're not as independent and free thinking as we think. And we are very much shaped by our social world. So we can get in there on our own, but individual action without collective action is not going to produce the same level of change as a well-organized social movement. Look, we've got to organize. And the reason that we're doing environmental sociology in the first place isn't just to be like, oh, that's interesting. Most of the tuna that are on our shores are poisoned and highly irradiated because they've been swimming around the ocean and the Fukushima disaster is still going on. Oh, that's interesting. I'd like some tuna, please. No, that's not it at all. Most of us are looking at environmental sociology so that we can identify a problem or something that needs our concern or that is a concern to people, and then we can do something about it. But one person, I mean, how much power, because we examine this in sociology, how much power do you have as an individual as compared to your classmates on this campus, in this class, right? Versus somebody who's actually voting to not join or to join another treaty, or saying we can't possibly afford the Green New Deal when we know that's a lie. And we'll talk about those economic models this semester too. But we do have the money for a Green New Deal, and we need to spend it now, or else we won't have that money and it'll cost us even more. And that is not fiscal conservatism at its best. If we are concerned about the cost, we act now and ahead of time, rather than once the levees have broken, the city's been flooded, and now our infrastructure's all screwed up. Now we're behind the ball, right? So we want to get ahead of it. To do that, we need other people. There is massive power in collective behavior so that we can change things for the better for everybody. I mean, honestly, here's some folks, that are sort of singular pictures, but we know that the start of a protest, what you can accomplish as a person, could be great, right? And of course, who's on the right? Rosa Parks. Now, Rosa Parks, contrary to the narrative, did not just get tired and sit down and be thrown into the civil rights movement. She was working with other housekeepers. They were collectively organized. It was a purposeful boycott, and it changed the trajectory of how we live completely. So you as an individual could be very impactful, right? Like Rosa Parks. But without other individuals, we will never be, right, as powerful and make as great a change as we can. So, my hope is always that we're protesting in ways that are peaceful, but we know a couple things. One, we can't always trust the media's view of it, so we have to look at it from a much more global perspective and multi-perspective when we look at different news outlets. We also know that if you're going to go out and protest, doing it in a way that's peaceful is almost always more effective and impactful. So showing up and yelling and screaming, I mean, even if you're not throwing things or engaging in violent behavior, can still be violent. So we have to look at the power of collective behavior, and how can those messages get across as peacefully and as importantly and with as much impact as possible. So to do that, though, we need other folks. All right. Well, that's the cute cow. And wow, that is some turkey wrapped in bacon. It looks delicious. Might be a little overkill for me. So where are you at personally? We'll do this. Maybe one more slide, then we'll move on. Would you be willing to eat less meat in order to slow climate change and our stress on our environment? Okay. Half as much would stop eating meat. Meat, nope. Or meat is gross, already there. Okay. So let's think about this, and then I'll leave it for this first lecture, and then I'll continue with the next one in chapter 1. But like, meat is just one idea. But let's make a list. What can we sacrifice individually to make a positive environmental impact? And I know, believe me, we're going to talk about it. It's difficult, particularly in this culture, to get across the idea that you may have to sacrifice something. But it was a lot more heavy-handed back in the day. I mean, back in the day, still had freedom, still had democracy. We had drafts. You had to go fight a war and potentially, and many people did, die. Or ration your food. You can't eat as much food as you want. Can you imagine us asking of people in 2020? Because we've seen how difficult it is when we ask people to sacrifice a little comfortability and wear some masks. And for some people, that's a huge infringement on their freedom. But look, what have we sacrificed in the past for democracy, for the greater good, and how has it made positive impacts? Whether that's a mask during the Spanish flu of 1918, or whether that's shutting off your lights and turning off your fan at night, or not running your TV all the time, or using different light bulbs. I mean, it could come in a lot of different forms. And mind you, I already know this, when we talk about sacrifice and things, like I said, in this culture, not always going to get the greatest response. And there are reasons that we shouldn't be asking people to always sacrifice. We'll get to that next time. All right, everybody. Be good people and do good things, and cue that music. That's right. Soch, fall 2020. Let's do this. Peace, everybody.